Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I thought I would do a sequel video to the children's book recommendations video I did last week. And now we'll move up in age and we'll go on to middle grade book recommendations. So just like in the children's book video, I mentioned how I'm not primarily a children's book reader or primarily a middle grade book reader, but I will read about 10 of each in a year. So through my lifetime, I've read enough that I was able to find some 4 or 5-star middle grade books that I reread and want to recommend to all of you. So just like in the children's book video, I am going to summarize each book quickly and concisely, share a quote that I enjoyed that really hints at why I liked the book, and leave you off with some keywords that hint at the subject or themes that were in each book. So hopefully with those pieces of information, you decide if it's a book that you might enjoy. First one is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. Now this book I read in university. I read it during an education course where we had to pick a middle grade book and make lesson plans on that book. So I've read this book multiple times. I've read every chapter and created discussion questions and picked out vocabulary and all those other things that an educator needs to do when they're trying to find ways to teach content and theme to the youth of the world. So this book is about a boy named Connor who struggles with coming to terms with his mother's declining cancer battle. Through this struggle, a monster introduces himself to Connor and tells Connor that he is going to visit Connor throughout the book multiple times. Each time he will tell Connor a story, and the final time the monster visits him, it's Connor's turn to tell the monster a story. And this quote, I'm going to share a quote that the monster tells Connor that highlights why I liked this book. Stories are important, the monster said. They can be more important than anything if they carry the truth. So my channel is called The Mass Story Write. I love stories, and I like stories because every story carries some truth to it. Even if they're fictional, there's always a universal or a personal truth that we as readers can connect to and take away. And this story I especially liked because there are multiple stories within a story. So this is right up my alley. Another thing I really liked about the stories in this book is each of the stories that the monster tells Connor is basically a fable or a folktale. So there is very powerful lessons to take away from each story, and they're lessons Connor needs to hear and at a very important moment in his life. Each of these stories really hints at some sort of takeaway that teaches Connor that life often moves in complex and sometimes seemingly contradictory ways, and that's okay. That universal message connected with me personally and made it so I couldn't stop thinking about this book. So if you like a book that deals with grief, death, and the power of truth, this is the book for you. So the next book is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupery. I first read this book in French when I was doing French immersion. So I was at the first intermediate level. I was just barely past beginner French when I read this book. It's not like I was proficient, but an appropriate level that I was able to understand and enjoy this book. So much so that I did read it in English a few years later. So to summarize this book, it is about a pilot, an adult pilot who is stranded in the desert and meets this young boy who then tells the pilot stories of the boy's various travels around the universe. And at one point, Little Prince says this quote I'm going to tell you, and this quote hints at why I liked this book. So at one point, the Little Prince says, "Grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is tiresome for children to be always and forever explaining things to them." I love when a book has a young character, a child character, teaching adults something. Because we all like to think that adults know everything, only adults have things to teach children, not the other way around. I love when stories flip that on their head because we were all children once. We all saw the world through a child's perspective, and sometimes seeing the world through a child's perspective is what we need, especially when it comes to enjoying life, stopping and enjoying the simple moments in life. This book communicates that in leaps and bounds. So if you like books about childhood versus adulthood, open-mindedness versus closed-mindedness, and connectedness versus loneliness, this is a great book for you. The next book is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I didn't read this book till last year, but as a child, I watched the movie many times. I still remember it was the first movie that came with little 3D glasses with like the one red eye and the one blue eye. I watch this every Halloween. This is my Halloween movie. Some people watch Hocus Pocus, some people watch Halloween Town, some people watch The Addams Family. No, this is the movie I watch every Halloween. So in this book, there's a girl named Coraline. She and her family just moved to this new home. Coraline explores this new home and finds a hidden door to a flat that is exactly like her family's flat, except her other mother and her other father live there. And at first, Coraline really enjoys being at the other mother's flat more. She gets to eat what she wants, do what she wants. Her parents are more involved in her life. Her other mother is more involved in her life. But then, about halfway through, Coraline realizes that her other mother and other father want to change her, and they want her to stay there forever. So why did I like this book? So this book, like A Monster Calls and The Little Prince, has very much a fairy tale-ish vibes to it, in that in Coraline there is definitely magic that exists. In the other mother's world, in the other mother's flat, the other mother can do things and see things and say things and hear things that she'd only be able to do through magical means. There's no logical explanation for what's going on there. I like me a good fairy tale. I like good fairy tale, magical fantasy vibes. As you know, I'm a big fantasy reader, but I especially like how Coraline interacts with the magic of the world, in that she has to use her wits, because Coraline does not have magic. She has to use her wits and her intelligence and manipulate the magic so that she can escape. And at one point, there's this black cat that helps Coraline, and at one point the black cat says, "Spiders' webs only have to be large enough to catch flies." So that quote really connects with me, because the black cat's not holding Coraline's hand, but he's giving her a clue to use when she's making plans to escape this world. So if you like a book that has to do with bravery, family, and curiosity, Coraline's a great read. And then the next book is called Whitebird by R.J. Palacio. R.J. Palacio wrote the book called Wonder, which many people read like 10 years ago. It's a well-known middle grade book about bullying and being different. And in that book, there's a character named Julian. Julian's not the main character, but he is in it. Julian's grandmother, hiding from the Nazis in France with the help of a boy in her class who hides her in his family's home. I enjoyed basically every character because their arc was so deep and impactful. Part of the reason was because the circumstances were so dire that many characters were forced to change and forced to grow and forced to mature in ways they shouldn't have had to, at the speed they shouldn't have had to. It was very eye-opening to see the character growth that was required of these characters. I also liked how this book definitely felt bittersweet at multiple moments, because that's how life is. There's many moments of triumph and loss, and these characters experienced both at many moments. A quote that really hints at a strong takeaway for me was when the grandmother, she's telling the story of her past to her grandson Julian. At one point she says, "You see, Julian, it always takes courage to be kind, but in those days when such kindness could cost you everything, your freedom, your life, kindness became a miracle. It becomes that light in the darkness that Papa talked about, the very essence of our humanity. It is hope." So if you like a book that talks about hope, kindness, survival, humanity, this is the book for you. The last couple books are actually by the same author. She is my favorite middle grade author. She primarily writes middle grade, and I have rated all of them at least 3 stars, and a good chunk of them 4 or 5 stars. So here's 2 of the 4 or 5 star middle grade books I enjoyed of hers. So the first one is called The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. This was actually a nominee for the 2015 Goodreads Choice Awards. So this book is about a young girl named Ada who has a twisted foot. She has a physical disability. And in this book, she escapes from London with her younger brother because during that time in World War II, a lot of children were shipped off to the countryside where it was safer. And she gets taken in by this woman who didn't really want to take him in, but she does. And it's there that she actually has the opportunity and the encouragement to learn how to actually live her life with her disability and to prove her worth. I really enjoyed how there's one of my favorite tropes in this book. Whenever there's a caring, strong mentor figure in a book, that's one of my favorite tropes. And actually, Ada has many of these mentors. When she leaves London and goes to the country, when she leaves her mother and goes to the countryside, she encounters many of these mentor figures that all have something to teach her and who all support her and encourage her, which is new for her. And it's through these mentor interactions that Ada develops the courage and has the opportunities to actually see what she's capable of, because her mother in London treated her like she couldn't do anything. I found that character growth in particular with the mentor trope was just two ingredients I needed to really love this book. At one point, Ada even says, "Then I did what I should have done to start with. I taught myself to walk." So you even see Ada realizing, I could have been doing this for many years, but it's only till now that I realized, hey, I can walk. I can do things. Another quote, I know I'm doing two quotes, but this is good. I really enjoyed this book. She later also says, "After that it was easy. It was the most impossible thing I'd ever done, but it was so easy. I held on to Jamie and I kept moving forward." I really like this one because she doesn't explicitly say it, but she's recognizing that walking to her was the hardest thing for so long, mentally, because she never had the opportunity or encouragement to try it. And now that she has the opportunity and encouragement and support from others, it's so easy. So what was hard about it before was just the mental blocks that she and others put in place around her. And now that those mental blocks are removed, it's actually easy. So I really like that recognition of mental versus physical capability. How mental beliefs impact physical capability. So if you like a book about overcoming adversity, family, freedom, and agency, this is a powerful book for those themes. And the last book I'm going to talk about is also by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, and it's called Fighting Words. This was also a nominee for the 2020 Goodreads Choice Awards, so pretty well known. It is about two sisters who are linked by their love for each other, but also the trauma they've experienced in their life because they are in the foster care system. Their mother was taken to prison when they were young. Then they were taken in by their mother's boyfriend, and their mother's boyfriend abused them. So they've had a pretty tough life, and this book is about them finding their own voices. Finally, they can find their way back to each other through love rather than trauma. I enjoy this book because I like books that have a strong mental health theme to them, and that exists in this book in leaps and bounds. Obviously, the harmful circumstances in these characters' lives heightened the emotional impact for the characters and for me, and I like a book that really makes me feel things. I also like how this story was told through the younger sister's perspective. So obviously we're getting a slightly more naive, limited perspective on what's going on with their lives and what's going on with the sister's mental health. So we get to see bits and pieces of the older sister's struggles, but not with the full knowledge of an adult who can perhaps see what's going on a little clearer. It really shows that mental health is not talked about very much, and for a child, unless it's explicitly told to them, they're not going to understand it because they haven't learned about it before. She can recognize the emotions in the situation. Her emotions can drive her to try to get what she needs, but sometimes she doesn't know what she needs. She doesn't know what her sister needs. She just feels the emotions. She feels the pain and the sadness, her own pain and sadness, and she can see her sister's pain and sadness, but she doesn't fully understand it, nor really 100% where it's coming from. which allows opportunity for a strong character arc, character growth, and also a powerful turning point in the plot when we as the reader also get let into what's really going on finally towards the end of the book. One quote that again really shows what I connected with in this book. At one point a character says, "I've learned that some things are almost impossible to talk about because they're things no one wants to know, not even me." You could really see through that quote that a huge part of the conflict is that no one wants to talk about mental health and it's stigmatized. So there's the hurdle of even communicating what's going on, let alone asking for what you need. And because that's still so prevalent today, I really appreciated seeing this distinct take on the impacts of that. What are the impacts of not talking about it and letting mental health topics be stigmatized? So if you like a book that talks about mental health, family, healing, that explores the stigma behind mental health and explores the impacts of sexual abuse on a young person's life, this is a book that's great for exploring that. So those are all the books I have to recommend, all the middle grade books I have to recommend. Some common themes you might have noticed with me is I like books that have stories within stories. The more stories, the better. I like fairy tale-esque, fable, folk tale type stories, ones that have powerful lessons to take away, powerful truths to connect with. And I like reading about children growing and thriving and healing through the care of strong mentors in their life. The strong mentor trope. And it's so much more powerful when it's a child benefiting, someone so young benefiting from a mentor, because we as a human species, as a social species, we do only survive through community, and when you're young you don't know enough on how to help yourself. So it's so much more powerful to read about a child getting the help they so desperately need, the support they so desperately need from strong, supportive adults in their life. And that's it. So I'll leave you with my usual question. I'm very curious if you have read any of these authors or read any of these books and what you thought of them. So with that, I will sign off and see you in my next video. Bye.